Interesting question now from person D, who's actually a trader.
Hmm.
Hi, hi, Jared. My strong point is math, and while you come highly recommended from a bunch of people I respect, I have a problem with psychology in general. Namely, that most of the academic psychology studies that seem to have really small sample sizes. What do you think of that? And I must say, I kind of understand where this person is coming from because as a poker sort of coming from a poker background, we're used to dealing with sample sizes of hundreds of thousands of hands before we can come to any kind of conclusions about anything. And some of the psychology studies you see don't reflect that. So I kind of see where this guy's coming from. But you're obviously in the industry, so maybe you have a slightly different view to that.
Yeah, I think the psychological research is like research in lots of fields. There is research that has been replicated. Same study been done by multiple people in multiple countries around the world with different size samples, and when those types of studies that have been replicated like that, and oftentimes they'll do a study about all the studies, and they'll come to conclusions based on all of that data. That's the stuff that I tend to focus the most on.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, there was I think a fairly groundbreaking kind of exposure of lots of research that this person may be referring to that had been proven not to be as reliable as we had thought. And I'm kind of blanking on some of the specific studies, but they were things that were fairly relevant that people had kind of taken as truth. And so when we look at psychological research and the merits of it, I think we have to use our kind of a bit of just logic and I got the word here. One second.
Bullshit detection, I think, is probably the key there.
Yeah, but it's more of like what you're.
Skepticism.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
I mean, I think we have to be a little bit skeptical of the research. I mean, you can't just take top line conclusions at face value unless they're really confirming of things that you've already believe about the world or are well established, and even then, you still want to have some skepticism. But I think one thing that not a lot of people realize about research is that for a psychological paper to be published, it only has to have 95% certainty that the statistics that are involved to come to those conclusions are actually reliable. Now 95% confidence is pretty high, but it's not 100%. And I mean, we talk about like a 5% failure rate. I mean, that's what is that, like the equity of a two-outer? I mean, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
So when you look at the replication of studies, so you take a particular study that's been replicated, let's say 50 times, and you have 95% confidence in the all 50 of those, then you're kind of converging on some certainty that this conclusion is probably pretty accurate. But when you only have one, and the sample size could be 20, with a bunch of college kids who are white or they're all of a similar demographic, whether it be age or gender or socioeconomic status or whatever. I mean, you're really dealing with some very homogeneous populations that are not really going to be very conclusive to the broad public. And then the other thing you got to look at too is, was this done in a real world setting?
Yes.
Sometimes,
yeah.
they're done in isolation, and I think the researchers that I really respect, and there are many of them, they understand their role. They're not practitioners like I am out in the field working with people, but I rely on the researchers to help to guide me to advanced methodologies or advanced ways of thinking about helping people and working with them, and they rely on me to be some of that bullshit detection, to say, listen, this is not how it's playing out in reality. Despite your conclusions, there are flaws in either the methodology or in the conclusions.